Okay, so we are 7-11 group discussion B for module 10. And just to repeat the two discussion prompts, one is to discuss two key concepts from Rogers' diffusion of an innovation model and describe how you can capitalize on these two concepts in our own intervention or innovation work. And then the second one, which we'll answer a little bit later on, which is to identify two key concepts from the reading on grounded theory, or the activities we did on grounded theory, and discuss them. So I think what we're going to do first is talk about the diffusion of innovation model first. So Sahar, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
It doesn't matter. You can take the lead and I'll jump in.
Okay. All right, perfect. So what I thought I would do is talk specifically about two of the 5 characteristics of innovation that I think are really relevant to me, one being relative advantage, and then the other one being compatibility. So relative advantage is just really the extent to which the innovation is perceived as being better as what we currently have, and the current practice we're trying to replace. And that is by and far one thing I'm hoping to be able in my innovation to be able to get people to understand is how can we replace the current communication protocols and the current methods with which we're communicating interdepartmentally to some kind of scaled up, more formal version that not only helps our employees, but can also help the students, right? Because my hope is that by improving interdepartmental communication within my college will improve communication to students and therefore kind of enhance their experience overall, where students don't feel like they're left in the dark and they feel like they actually understand what's going on. Especially a lot of our students, 40% of our students, I know we were just talking about this, 40% of our students are first generation. So many of them don't know how to navigate not only the academic structure of college, but the social structure of college, understanding what a bursar and a registrar and all of those things are. So relative advantage, that one little piece of the innovation, I think is really, really important to me. The other piece, just to kind of talk about it quickly, which is compatibility, is in my sense, it's a characteristic that basically looks at how similar is the innovation compared to the values and the perceived needs of the people who are going to adopt that innovation. So one of the interventions that I'm hoping to implement is a formalized communication system at the institution. We don't have it. We have kind of all of these technologies, but they're all disjointed right now. And I'd like to really formalize some way that we can all speak to each other, whether it's something as simple as using Slack or Monday.com or some communication method, because right now, students kind of leave each office and they kind of wander around, but they don't totally know what they should be doing. So what I'm hoping is that to one, get a baseline that everyone feels, yes, I don't think we communicate well, which is in my kind of pre-cycle 0 interviewing, I've already determined that that's pretty much the case for most people. And then on the flip side, to kind of use this intervention or this innovation from a compatibility standpoint and say, listen, we all agree this does not work, but if we can use X, Y, and Z and plug it in and make it better for everybody, are we all in agreement now that this would be something good? So those are my two areas within this theory that I've thought about. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Mike. So the two that I have been going back and forth with is, one is compatibility, but compatibility I feel like will come after I go through triability. So triability is like, where you try out your innovation before committing to the full options. And the reason why I think this is going to be important for me is with the lack of research that has been done with pharmacy admissions and diversity, I think it's important that before we jump full force and commit so much time and resources and people into something, there should be kind of like a mini model first, something that we try out first, use surveys, measure it, see what the users have to say. And before, even creating these innovations, I think it's important that I do a survey and see kind of like, where's the drop off, like what's kind of needed from our end, because as we talked about before, it's not that we don't have underrepresented students who are interested in our program. It's more of why aren't they going through the admissions process, right? Or, they apply or their applications are in progress. If we extend an interview, more than half don't respond. And then when we make offers, very little acceptor offers. So I think there needs to be kind of like a trial and error period based off of, responses before, I commit to something. Because there's a lot of things that I've thought about, but again, those things take time and resources and people. And with the lack of staffing that we already have, I just really want to be efficient with our time. And then that kind of goes into compatibility and how, you use those experiences and see how everything works together. And I don't think I can reach compatibility unless I have trial and errors.
Yeah, and what's just really quickly, what's interesting about triability is that even though it's technically listed in the article after compatibility and complexity, you almost feel like that is the trial and error stage, right? Where people need to at least test it out. I understand, I guess, in a sense, why compatibility would be first, because you have to create the need for everyone to kind of be in agreement, right? That we need to do something. But I do feel like triability is, that piece where we kind of dip our toe in the water, so to speak, before committing to that full adoption, right? That's kind of that trial and error with any product, right? Whether it's a digital technology or whether it's, something that we're doing, in respect to admissions, and that's the interesting piece about it. Absolutely. So great.
Yeah, and I feel like with admissions, there's always complexities to it. No matter how hard we try to make it more streamlined, there's always complexities. There's always considerations to think about.
Yeah, and especially this year, and I don't know if you've seen this, but obviously with undergraduate admissions, it's such a difficult year because so many students are stepping out, and at least where I'm located in the Northeast, students that are completing their FAFSA, their application for student aid, that's down about 20% in the Northeast region. And we've noticed that like students that do the common application have kind of just said, forget it, I'm done. I can't be on the computer again. So like one thing, talk about triability, one thing we're doing is we have about 8,000 students who are inquired about us. We're actually sending them all a pre-populated paper application to their families, basically saying, listen, you hate being online, we hate being online. Let's just take that part out and let meet us halfway to do the work, right? And just sign it, send it back to us, and we'll count you in. Because for us, the biggest battle is getting the student to actually apply, right? And so if we can take that busy work out of being in an online environment, that's kind of in itself an innovation, kind of really changing what we're doing from a financial and an admissions perspective. So we'll see what happens. We're sending it out next week. So
Yeah,
it's
and
going to
I
be
think
awesome or horrible.
Yeah, I think that's awesome that you guys are doing that, because I know right now with undergraduates, we've been affected too, because a lot of our undergraduate pre-pharm students are taking that time off, or they're working. There's just so many factors right now that's affecting undergraduate admissions. We've seen it, we felt it, and at the graduate level, it's a little bit trickier because sure, we have less seats to fill, but it's harder to fill those seats if we don't have our undergraduate students, going through, the curriculum. So
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we want to touch just very briefly on grounded theory and some activities we did on grounded theory and all of that stuff. So I thought, just kind of on the surface, I've talked a little bit about kind of the coding and the concepts side of grounded theory. I mean, the thing about grounded theory that's so interesting to me is that it's obviously a cyclical process where things keep happening, right? Data collection, coding, theoretical sampling, and then you kind of keep coming back to it before you yourself develop your own theory, right? So when you go from that research question down to sampling, and then that whole kind of data collection, coding process, and it's always constant comparison before you are kind of in that quote unquote grounded theory. So for me, what I thought was kind of, interesting is kind of obviously where you could kind of review in that beginning, you're reviewing technical literature, you're selecting cases, you're developing your own coding methods, in that actual collection phase where you kind of develop some rigorous data collection protocol, and then the ordering, right? The coding itself, the ordering, which I think, in my opinion, and I think I'm learning this through our BINS assignment as we discussed, I think the way that we specifically code for ourselves is probably one of the most important things that we can do, because being able to reference back to our own individual codes is really important. And I'll just kind of stop with this part, is that I did start my, I guess Thursday or Friday, I started to do some of my cycle 0 interviewing. And I immediately recognized after my second interview of an administrator, I was all wrong in how I was starting to code things, because what I needed to identify was, through my questioning, you can code, but the answers and the way that they're answering it does not always relate to the question, right? And I think I mistakenly thought it's going to be call and response, right? I'm going to give them a question, they're going to give me an answer, clean and good to go. And what I noticed is that I think I have like 7 or 8 questions that I asked, and they always went back. It kept going back and kept going back. So I needed to develop some way to code all of that all through the way to really find that similar content to group it.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I was looking into some qualitative research not too long ago, and there was one that I found about a nursing school and their URM students, and they were talking about how they were using coding to help with their interview process. And in their team, they had a main coder, which I'm assuming was their main researcher, and then they had a coder that was so the main coder was just the researcher. The second coder was someone who had their PhD in like some type of data sciences, where they knew just the language. And then the third person was I think a doctor of nursing person, like a DAFNP. And these 3 people worked together to analyze and look at all the language that came out from the interviews. And I thought that was really cool, because each person had a different perspective on like those key terms and how to code them, and how to put them together for their research. And it's starting to, and that kind of made me think about next year when we start putting our chairs together, and how important it's going to be to bring someone in who might be more research oriented and maybe quantitative or qualitative, where they can look at coding and language in a different way than I can do that. But the other thing about grounded theory, I just looked into a little bit more so I could have a better understanding, is they stated online that the researcher really immerses themselves in the daily lives and the routines of what is being studied, and that really helps them with like the key terms and how to code. So I thought that would be interesting for me once I get to the meat of my research. How much can I get involved, like with the students?
Yeah, and just to touch on what Jenny wrote in her response, she wrote, researchers begin their work by studying a single event or incident, and then continue to evaluate more of these events until they come up with the hypothesis that is supported by their work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think in a sense, even the development of our problem of practice was developing a semi-grounded theory, right? So we had to, because we, like when you're talking about bringing URM, underrepresented minority students into more pharmacy, or I'm talking about improving communication, that didn't happen like we thought it. We thought it was a problem without having some knowledge of it, right? And it wouldn't have happened just once. It happens multiple times. So that's how it really develops to kind of what the thought process is for us. And I think that's the interesting piece. So.
Yeah, and one additional thought, when I'm thinking about our POPs and when we think about it, I can't stop and I can't help but to think about the wicked theories and thinking about the wicked problems, and it just always stuck with me, because this is an issue. Even with your POP, these are things that organizations know about. They try to help, but then what happens down the line? So I'm interested to see how all this coming together helps.
Absolutely. All right. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.